And we got no problem with a lot of the theory of evolution. You know, mutations occurring in the environment, or animals or species adapting to their environment, we have no problem with that whatsoever. Many times you'll hear Muslims saying that we completely reject the theory of evolution. No, on the contrary. Yes, someone might reject macro versus micro evolution, meaning that's a whole change from one species to another, maybe something that is rejected. Whereas different moments where animals adapt to their environment, which have existed, or there's mutations that may exist, we have no problem with that whatsoever. So, you know, to reject these things outright would be to go against a lot of the literature that we have, that there was a lot of life form before Nabi Adam alayhi salam. But the idea that, you know, one particular species completely changes into a human being is something that we reject.
Now, you mentioned that there was a lot of species created before Prophet Adam alayhi salam. Now, no, we don't see any records of, you know, reactions from the angels when those species were created. But when we see Prophet Adam alayhi salam created, we see a reaction from the angels. But what was that initial reaction from the angels?
Actually, the angels did react when they saw the rebelliousness of the creatures who were there before Nabi Adam alayhi salam.
Okay.
The angels had a reaction of sadness. They couldn't believe that this creation that was on the earth, which the fossil records show us existed before Adam, they could not believe that they were so rebellious against the Lord. And the angels were very hurt by what was happening. And it seems that within Islamic traditions, the Lord decides that, well, of those who are rebellious, there's a punishment. And of those who are of the good, they are to be taken towards another abode. They are to be saved. Of which, of one of them who's saved, has the title of Iblis. Yes, which we will come to shortly. So the angels do have that reaction. Now, the angels, it's interesting that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Islamic sources supposedly ends that period or that millennia where the nasnas exist or the humanoids exist, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a conversation with the angels, which is documented both in the Quran and in the world of hadith. And the conversation is that I'm going to appoint a representative of mine on the earth. And this representative of mine is going to be a representative who's going to show the best of values, is going to be full of justice, is going to have dignity and devotion and intellect and so on. So there is this discussion that occurs between God and the angels. Now, when this discussion occurs, the discussion is mentioned in the Quran from chapter 2, verse 30 till about 34, 35. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. Yes, your Lord said to the angels, I'm sending a Khalifa on the earth. Their reply was interesting. And their reply, according to certain scholars, indicated that they had known of a life form before Adam. أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. Are you going to send someone who causes mischief and bloodshed while we worship you and sing your blessings? How would they have known about a creation that causes mischief and bloodshed unless there's already been a creation preceding Adam alayhi salam? Some scholars have looked at this in different ways. Some scholars have said the very makeup of the human being, having the power of intellect, but anger, desire, and imagination, is a recipe for disaster. If intellect is able to overcome one's desires or one's anger, then yes, the human is higher than the angel. But if the desires and imagination overcome the intellect, then what you have is that the human can become lower than an animal. It's interesting that there is a discussion that Jibreel alayhi salam has with Adam when Adam is first created, where Adam is offered intellect, decency and devotion. Adam takes intellect And decency and devotion say that we can never leave the intellect. We'll always be alongside the intellect.
Yeah.
For a person to be an upright individual, intellect's not enough. There has to be a decency about their character.
Yep.
And there has to be a devotional aspect to them, which we will come to another occasion. So what you have here is that the angels ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala this question. Now, the reaction to this question, I'm not sure, you find traditions that there is there's a remorse on their part, as if there's a punishment meted out against them for questioning God's judgment. Which is interesting.
Yep.
When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees a matter, it is not for us to question. When they say أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاء وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. Are you going to send someone who causes mischief and bloodshed? God, what's happening? This has happened before.
Yeah.
You've got people on that earth who are mischievous, who are rebellious. Again?
Yeah.
Is that what you're going to do? Is that what's going to happen? And his reply is a wonderful reply. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replies, قَالَ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. He said, I know that which you do not know. That you've got a point about the fact that you've seen mischief and rebellion in my creation. But you're going to see a creation who, not just him, he is one of the greatest of my creation. But you're going to see in his loins greater and greater creations who are going to be unbelievable in their dignity, in their intellect, in their devotion, and in their worship. The same way you do tasbih, taqdees, you do the honoring and glorifying, you're going to see a group who are more majestic than even this creation.
Subhanallah. You mentioned that of the jinn that were saved, one was Iblis, or Shaitan, as we call him. Now, we do hear different names for Iblis, let's call him for now. What was his status at the time of the creation of Prophet Adam alayhi salam?
The time of Adam, he's in quite a lofty position. If you're reading the traditions of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, you're looking at somebody who was worshipping his Lord for 4,000 to 6,000 years or more.
Wow.
I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so just that even for that act, it's why he gives him respite later on. But he's in a lofty position. He knows that a decision has been made, that God is going to appoint a Khalifa on the earth. He still hasn't come to an understanding as to what this creation is exactly like. It seems that there are discussions taking place, because if you're looking at the world of hadith, God, Jibreel, Israel, all of them are involved in discussions about the creation of Adam. And there are these interesting traditions about how the earth, when it talks to God. Now, you read in the Quran, there are numerous verses about how God offered his trust to the heavens and the earth and the mountains. Yep. So these inanimate seeming creations do have this relationship with their Lord. And the earth, seemingly in this stage, doesn't want parts of it to be taken, because it doesn't want from its dust for a creation to be created who's going to be rebellious against the Lord. It's as if the earth has seen that there have been rebellious creations, and the earth in these discussions, now these could be, hagiographical discussions or whatever, but it's very interesting that you find that Iblis at this time is in the company of the angels. The Quran gives us this indication. And we still don't find that he's rebelled yet. He's still witnessing what's happening. Yeah.
A very important question. Something that I don't think a lot of people have thought about. What does Adam actually mean?
Adam comes from Adim al-Ard, which means to be created from the dust of the surface of the earth. Yeah.
Okay. Now we hear in the Quran, in the famous verses, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ صَلْصَالٍ مِنْ حَمَإٍ مَسْنُونٍ. Now the Quran mentions the words masnoon, hama, salsal. What are the definitions for all of these? And is there a time period mentioned for how long it took Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to create Prophet Adam alayhi salam?
Yes, it's very interesting that you mentioned that. You know, hama and masnoon, salsalin kal fakhar. We hear sometimes in wedding ceremonies when the Mawlana sits with the husband and wife who are, you know, giving their lives away. You hear Alhamdulillah alladhi khalaqa Adam min salsalin kal fakhar. And you hear this hama, you hear turab, you hear other words which are mentioned as well. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam has a phenomenally vivid description of the creation of Nabi Adam alayhi salam. Hama and masnoon. What you have here is, as I said, they're trying to get from the earth, they're trying to pull the dust from the earth. The earth tells Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I don't want my earth to create or to be part of a creation that's going to rebel against you. Do you know who takes the task of getting the dust from the earth? Israel. And that's why on that moment that he took the dust from the earth, Allah decided he's going to take the people's souls from their bodies. It was at that moment, in the creation of Adam alayhi salam, at that moment, Israel said, you know what, all of you guys keep going to the earth, you're not doing anything about it, I'm doing it. When they've pulled the dust from the earth, all of these words that then you see are trying to explain to us the process behind the creation of Adam, possibly trying to reply to those who are saying ape, human, by saying, hold on. We don't just describe it by saying, although we can, and we have, by saying kun fayakun. We're also going to explain to you the intricacies behind it. So we're going to pull dust from the earth, the dust from the earth and the water put together. You're going to have that clay. But you're still going to have these larger pieces that are there. You remove them until you fashion it into, as if the way you're fashioning pottery. Salsal kal fakhar is this connection to the world of pottery. You know, people get the clay and they're molding something into shape. The Arab mind maybe needs something like this, or not the Arab mind, the human mind today needs something like this to understand that everything is created with precision. The one who has the major problem with this is Iblis. On one occasion, now they say that Adam, you know, we do have interest in the Quran, you know, ayahs such as خَلَقَهُ مِن تُرَابٍ ثُمَّ قَالَ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونَ. Be and it will be. Allah, you know, time doesn't affect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but sometimes you hear that we created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, we created Adam over 80 years, okay? Now, still in his lifeless form, there is a narration that Iblis walks past and there is this moment where Iblis suddenly says, clay, fire. That moment is the downfall. Why? Because two attributes come in one moment. And that is takabbur and hasad. Correct? These two come in together. And God save you if you have these diseases in your life. That, you know, in life we have physical diseases. And you want to get treated straight away. So when I hear someone has cancer, they want to get chemotherapy, for example. When I hear someone has diabetes, when I hear someone has HIV, when I hear someone has, you know, there's other illnesses, they don't get treated. But when you have certain spiritual diseases, they are the worst that you could face. Iblis, all of a sudden, is thinking to himself that you created me from fire and you created him from this clay. this foul-smelling, dark clay. I'm higher and I deserve that position. Why is he the one getting that position?
Yeah.
And that's the downfall. Now you could have worshipped for thousands of years.
Yeah.
But if your worship has a tinge of arrogance, thinking that you're better than somebody else in terms of your creation, that, you know, that person doesn't deserve to even be looked at, looking down at people, and that defines a Muslim. What defines a Muslim is really their akhlaq. Can they master takabbur? Can they master hasad? Can they master these areas where spiritually they can destroy you? There's no point coming and praying or fasting in the holy month of Ramadan if you're envious of others. You know, there are people who look extremely religious, but they have so much hasad inside them. It's unbelievable. If they see somebody more famous than them, they're envious against them. If they see better looking, they're envious against them. If they see somebody getting all the plaudits, they're envious against them. But don't get me wrong, a lot of these look religious.
Yeah.
You'll see the tasbih, you know, the subha in their hand regularly, the beard growing, the abaya being worn, but they are a walking machine of hasad. However much they will talk to you about Ahlul Bayt, the best thing that can happen to these people is for them to leave society, go purify themselves, then come back. Stop talking about Ahlul Bayt's lives when you are a machine of hasad.
Yeah.
What then is the difference between you and shaitan? You claim to be a lover of Ahlul Bayt. Shaitan, at that one moment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks those angels, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ. Allah asked the angels, prostrate to Adam. All of them prostrate except Iblis. He refused. His arrogance overtook him. Because he thought that he was greater than who? Than Nabi Adam alayhi salam. After the break, we'll look at why Adam, the angels and Iblis all would realize that he is a greater creation, inshallah.
Ahsan to say, and that's a very great reminder to be wary of the disease of envy and arrogance that surrounds our communities today. Inshallah, before we go to the break, I'd like to remind the viewers that if you do want to call in the second part to ask the Sayyid a question, call in on 0203 515 0199 or text in your questions down below, wherever you are in the world. Now, just before we go to the break, during the break, what was the special criteria for him that made him become the Khalifa?
Knowledge.
Knowledge.
The Lord ends the discussion with the angels by saying, إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. I know that which you do not know. He teaches Adam what the Quran says, he teaches Adam the names. When he asks Adam to say these names, Adam has the knowledge of them. When he asks the angels realize that we don't have that knowledge. God's Khalifa on the earth cannot be somebody who's deficient in their ilm, but has to be somebody who can walk around anywhere and say, ask me before you lose me.
Subhanallah, yeah.
We can't have somebody as God's Khalifa on the earth who is being corrected 24/7 by people around him because they're making mistakes in relation to their knowledge. You're representing God.
Yep.
The angels, when God asked them about their knowledge, they realized that we're lacking something.
Yeah.
Iblis realizes, but his arrogance is too much to be willing to admit. And so what you have over here is a key point in understanding monotheism, prophethood, as well as imamah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses his Khalifa on earth, that Khalifa has got to be the one with a God-given knowledge. That knowledge is communicated at times from God to that Khalifa through Jibra'il. That's a highest form of wahi. You see, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, normal human beings can have limited forms of wahi. Musa's mother, وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَىٰ أُمِّ مُوسَىٰ أَنْ أَرْضَعِيهِ. Bees, وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى النَّحْلِ. There are limited forms of communication between God and His creation. But the highest is either Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to His Khalifa on the earth through Jibra'il, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may use dreams, or Allah may inspire. So what you have therefore is that the angels realize at this moment that His knowledge is higher than ours. His knowledge is a God-given knowledge. And therefore they all bow in prostration before Adam, except Iblis.
But Sayyidina, surely sujood to a human being, is that not form of polytheism?
Yeah, no. Sujood can be divided into two. Sujood related to ibadah is different from sujood of ta'zeem. A sujood of worship is only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you see Muslims 5 times a day say Subhana Rabbi al-A'la wa bihamdih, that is only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The words are clear. Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. A sujood of ta'zeem, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, number one, a test of your obedience at this moment. Their obedience is being tested. Don't tell me I've done prayers for 6,000 years. It's a key lesson. How many prayers you prayed, it could only come down to one act of disobedience. And then all of these deeds are nullified. So, a sujood of ta'zeem. Now sometimes people ask the question that if I'm going to Najaf or Karbala, sometimes you find people doing sujood when they enter the mosque. And that sujood sometimes can be seen towards the grave of that person buried in that land. And our maraja are clear. If that sujood is to that person, that's something not allowed. If that sujood is thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for blessing us with the ziyarah of this person, then that is allowed.
Yeah.
So therefore, the sujood related to ibadah is a sujood different from ta'zeem. One is a sujood of worship, another is a sujood of reverence.
Now you mentioned in the previous point that this khilafah, especially because it was sent down to, given to Prophet Adam alayhi salam, it was the khilafah of knowledge. It was the khilafah of knowledge. Now, is this khilafah representative for humans, or is it on a spiritual status as well?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً, it depends what context you're discussing this. If we're discussing for humanity in general, in its relation with the animal kingdom and the angels and the jinn and the plants, then the most honorable creation is the human being. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the spirit which He has breathed into that human being and made him His Khalifa on the earth. Something which the mountains and the heavens and the earth did not take, but the human took on that trust. And I think it's a great honor if we remind ourselves that we are the khulafa of God on earth. So in some contexts, the human is seen as, general. And then in others, this person is not just the Khalifa of Allah as a human, but rather he is also the Khalifa who represents the message of God on earth to the rest of humanity. Therefore that person is infallible. Therefore that person is one who receives their knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah.
That person is chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are certain areas such as ilm, isma, nas, all go and surround the Caliph of God on earth. Yeah.
So, because I've heard of this tradition. Now, it says that the tradition mentions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam from Allah's image. Now, is that not also a form of polytheism?
Yeah, sometimes you hear this tradition, God created Adam in his own image. Or God created man in his own image. And I know that that affected certain Christian beliefs, even some Muslim beliefs. There are some Muslims in the world who believe Allah has a face, Allah has hands, Allah has a shin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sits on a throne. We differ with them.
Of course.
When we say God created Adam in his own image, it means God created Adam in the image that was already ordained in the guarded tablet. Meaning that there was an image that was ordained for Adam and the children of Adam. In that, we talk of the Lawh al-Mahfuz, the preordained guarded tablet. That was the image in which Adam was created. Nothing to do with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being in any human or physical form.
Okay. Now, with Iblis, with Shaitan, now this can directly link to us, it can directly link to the viewers out there. It's a special case where envy and arrogance has now become such a big thing in our communities that people aren't able to essentially control it. Now, when is it that envy and arrogance kicked in for Iblis? When was it that moment where Iblis said, you know what, this creation is not better than me?
Well, like I said, Iblis recognized that Adam is created from clay and that he's created from fire. And that was the cause of his expulsion. From his higher state, he was lowered from that state. He was in the company of the angels in the highest position, and then he was expelled. And he was expelled simply because of that moment of arrogance that he displayed. So he could not take the fact, and he even makes it clear, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you want me to do sujood to you, I'll do sujood to you, but never to Adam. Obedience to Allah isn't on my terms. It's on the terms of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah.
If it was on my terms, we'll make a mockery of this religion. I'll say, Ya Allah, I'll pray 5 times a day, I'll fast in Ramadan, but if you don't mind, the rest of the year I want to drink alcohol, I want to commit adultery, I want to gamble and so on. No, there's a complete submission. And that's what Iblis lacks. And it's from that moment onwards that Iblis has this enmity. That I was in the loftiest of positions, but you could be in the loftiest of position. With that drop of arrogance in you and that drop of envy, you could fall easily.
But with that arrogance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have easily just destroyed Iblis. Just there and then, destroyed Iblis, and we wouldn't have even heard from him. But what is it that Iblis asks from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And if, what he asked from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, did Allah grant him that wish? And we could look on the other side. Did Prophet Adam ask anything from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And if he did Allah grant him his wish?
Yeah, I think Nabi Adam could not believe, if you look at certain traditions, Nabi Adam's asking questions, why is this Iblis not destroyed for this moment? And it seems the reply is that Iblis still did some good.
Okay.
Allah is so just, He doesn't forget that good. If Iblis was to ever ask for forgiveness for what he said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about sujood to Adam, Allah would forgive him.
Wow.
Until now, if Iblis was to ask for forgiveness. But people like Iblis and others who've come from the children of Iblis in history, however many opportunities they have, they don't take them. So therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Iblis, as we mentioned earlier, worshipped God for 4,000 to 6,000 years or more, Allah gave him that respite. There's then these conversations. Iblis begins to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for certain things. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ready to give him a number of things. I think the one area where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not give to Iblis is Iblis wants to be able to manifest himself as a prophet or as an imam. And that Allah does not give him.
Yeah.
Nabi Adam witnessing Iblis in his fall, asking Allah and Allah still replying. Nabi Adam then begins to ask Allah himself for certain things. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants Adam these things. Amongst them, for example, is, O Adam, know one thing, that your people, if they have a niyyah, an intention to do a good deed, I will reward them for that intention. And if they do the good deed, we'll multiply it by 10. Know that with your people, whenever they ask for forgiveness, the doors of Tawbah are always open for them. So there's these interesting discussions that take place at this moment. Yeah.
Sayyidina, we're going to take a couple of questions coming in from WhatsApp. My question is, Shaitan misguides human beings and makes them disobey Allah. What made him disobey God?
What made him disobey? His disobedience to God directly is not a disobedience in the sense of him having a problem with God. He just had a problem with God telling him to do sujood to Adam. That he could not take. And that arrogance brought his downfall.
Now, why is it... Now, you mentioned that arrogance, that disease. Why then let Iblis continue with that arrogance?
4,000 years he had worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and therefore because of that 4,000 years, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored him. In which sense? In the sense that I'll let you live until the day that they are raised. However, the rest of the arrogance that he displayed after that, the Quran mentions his conversations. I'm going to come to them from every angle, I'm going to destroy them. He even says, فَبِعِزَّتِكَ لَأَغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ إِلَّا عِبَادَكَ مِنْهُمُ الْمُخْلَصِينَ. He tries his hardest to deceive. And I think the main deception that is mentioned is the deception in relation to Adam and the tree.
So, there's a mention of God creating Eve from the rib of Adam alayhi salam. That narration.
Yeah.
Would you be able to highlight?
Yeah, no such thing. We don't believe in it.
We don't believe
this whole idea that Eve was created from the rib of Adam, these are amongst the Israeliyat that can be found not just in other schools, but also within our school. And we reject this. The same clay Allah used, which we mentioned earlier, to create Nabi Adam, from that same clay He created Eve alayhi salam. Yeah.
Now, how long was it that Eve and Adam resided in that garden of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
They had resided there for a 7-hour period, according to many of the traditions. Shaitan sought to find a way to ruin what was happening. Remember, the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of them could look up to Nabi Adam. Nabi Adam really had no one to look up to. And therefore with Nabi Adam alayhi salam, what you had was that him and Eve are living in this heavenly abode. There are different opinions as to what this heavenly abode is. Some say it's the Jannah that we're going to go to after we die. Others say that it's somewhere on the earth. You've heard of serendipity? So they say there's an area called Sarandip. Some say in Sri Lanka that was where they were. Others say that somewhere between the heaven and the earth, a type of barzakhi realm. There are different opinions, irrespective, that while Adam and Eve are in this garden, let's say, Iblis is trying his hardest to affect them, to tempt them. The narrations mention that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells them, enjoy whatever you want of that garden, except that tree.
Yeah.
Be careful. The Quran mentions that he's going to deceive them, and that if you're going to have anything from that tree, it's going to make you go to the earth and toil in the earth.
Okay.
It doesn't say, I'm going to be angry with you, I'm going to punish you, you would have sinned. And that's the point about Nabi Adam. Did he commit a sin? Firstly, he's in a heavenly abode. There's no sin in that area. There's sin on the earth. Because there's a sharia, a particular legislative system. If I go against it, I commit a sin. In that heavenly abode, there's no sin. Therefore, if there's no sin, then Allah's command is not a command of prohibition. We have two types of commands. Amr Mawlawi and Amr Irshadi. Command of prohibition, a command of recommendation. A command of prohibition is not in that heavenly abode. That serendipity, wherever that area is, it's not in that heavenly abode. So it's a command of recommendation. I recommend you, do not eat from that tree. I say to you, Minhal, I recommend you, don't eat sweets from that shop, because eating that many sweets is going to affect your health. When you eat the sweets from that shop, are you committing haram? No. But you're going against my recommendation.
Yep.
Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam was asked, why would Nabi Adam alayhi salam listen to shaitan? Why would he listen? Knowing what shaitan has done. And Imam al-Baqir answers this in a beautiful way. Imam al-Baqir says, nobody up until that point had sworn by Allah and lied. You know, we Iraqis, we love to say, Wallah, Wallah, Wallahi, Wallah, Wallah. Every second of the day we say this, correct? Yep. We always are swearing by Allah. Other languages will say, Billahi. Others say, Tallahi. Others, if you don't want your parents to know that you're lying, you'll say, Wallati. Something like this. Everybody will be swearing by Allah now. Someone may lie. Up until that point, nobody has said, by Allah, if you eat from that tree, nothing will happen to you. Nobody had ever said that and lied. Nabi Adam, therefore, that whole discussion that occurred, that whole context was a context relating to an induction program, a training program. Some said, Adam's been expelled from heaven. Hold on. It was only half an hour ago that I said, the Quran says, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. Allah has chosen a Khalifa on the earth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He says, I've chosen a Khalifa on the earth, that means whatever Adam's going to go through, he's still my Khalifa. But now he's aware.
Yeah.
Shaitan is the open enemy. أَلَمْ أَحَدْ إِلَيْكُمْ يَا بَنِي آدَمَ لَا تَعْبُدُوا الشَّيْطَانَ إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ مُبِينٌ وَأَنِ اعْبُدُونِ هَذَا صِرَاطٌ مُسْتَقِيمٌ. Now Adam is aware. Shaitan is the open enemy. Some said it was his wife Eve, that's the reason he committed a sin, and therefore all of the womankind was punished because of Eve. This is nonsense. Again, Israeliyat, entering Islamic traditions. Adam and Hawa went through this induction program where they realized. Now you have certain theologians who looked at this issue. Why? Because if the Shia believe that every prophet is ma'soom, wasn't this a sin? We made it clear. Number one, it can't be a sin where it was. You know, you're not going to be sinning in that heavenly garden, you know, wherever it may be. Secondly, it's not a command of prohibition. Command of prohibition relates to the world of taklif. The world of taklif relates to the earth. Adam is still not on the earth as God's Khalifa. Thirdly, this concept of infallibility is a fundamental concept which has been alluded to with a discussion on Tark al-Awla. Interesting that you have this discussion of Tark al-Awla, where we'll look at it with Adam, we'll look at it with Musa, we'll look at it with Isa, that he went for, instead of going for the recommended, he went for that which was good. He didn't go for that which was better. He left that which was better. That again is not seen as being a sin. Okay, so when you're looking at the idea, did Adam commit a sin? Where was Nabi Adam alayhi salam? That's not the world of Sharia, not the world of taklif. Therefore, it was not a sin. However, they did leave that particular area to go into another area.
Now, Sayyid, just you know, just quickly, because we are quite running out of time. Where was their abode on earth?
Oh, their abode on earth was within the vicinity of Mecca. Adam was on Mount Safa, Eve was on Mount Marwa. Safa, Assalamu alayka ya waritha Adam, Safwatillah. So even that line in Ziyarat Warit Safa, he was there. Eve was where? On the hillcock of Marwa, Amra, lady, woman, Marwa. So she was there, and they were, and there was a sense of sadness that they were away from, you know, they were away from that garden. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ensured that surrounding them, they were the ones who actually, according to some opinions, begun the structure of the Kaaba. The Hajar al-Aswad was placed within the first structure of the Kaaba. And they were the ones who did the first Hajj. They went towards Arafah, and it was near Arafah where he begins to ask Allah for forgiveness.
Now, when he begins to ask Allah for forgiveness, Adam Prophet Adam alayhi salam is known as one of the bakka'un, one of the criers. You know, who were the other criers? Why was he known as one of the criers? And how did his repentance from the Lord get accepted?
Well, some ask the question, if he's asking Allah for forgiveness, that must mean he must have sinned. No, not necessarily. We can never do justice to what Allah has given us in life.
Yeah.
And if we for a second feel that we have not given that justice, then we keep asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, forgive us. We have not given you your due. We didn't do enough tasbih, we didn't do enough salawat, we haven't read enough Quran. It's not because you committed a sin that you're saying istighfar. You just feel that you should give much more back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you know, he's there at Mount Arafah, standing there the way many of us stand there in the period of Hajj. And it's at that Mount Arafah, around that area, where he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But interestingly, he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with 5 names mentioned.
Ahsant, yep.
And this is fundamental. You can ask Allah directly.
Yeah.
But when you mention Muhammad and Al Muhammad, salawatullah wa salamu alayhima, it makes a huge difference to your dua. I always say to people, the tradition of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon his family, a dua has a veil on it. Salawat removes that veil. What does Adam say? بحق محمد وأنت المحمود وبحق فاطمة وأنت فاطر السماوات والأرض وبحق علي وأنت الأعلى وبحق الحسن وأنت المحسن وبحق الحسين وأنت قديم الإحسان. He asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, forgive me and my wife. And this is a wonderful supplication. And as you mentioned wonderfully, they're known as Bakka'un, him. Later we'll see Nabi Yusuf, Nabi Yaqub, Fatima al-Zahra, Imam Zayn al-Abidin. Not just talking to Allah, there is a tear shed when they talk to Allah. Nabi Adam establishes for us a number of different acts of worship. Salah is important to him. He does the tawaf. He stones Shaitan. Shaitan can't get to Adam anymore. Shaitan tried, Adam learned the lesson, you're not coming near me anymore. So there are many wonderful lessons to be gained from that period of his life. Yeah.
So say, just quickly before we end the show, I think this is a question that's been on everyone's mind. When you think of Adam and Eve, you think, you know, they had this family, they created this family, Qabil, Habil. Okay, how many kids did they have? You know, how did we procreate? Because, you know, Adam, Eve, Qabil, Habil, or maybe other children.
Yeah.
But then, you know, surely to continue the human life, you need a form of partner.
Yeah.
To procreate.
Yeah.
So how was it that they procreated?
Yeah, they had a daughter by the name of Anak. Anak. And they had the son Qabil and another son Habil. And another son who we're going to come to tomorrow, who was known as Sheeth. Now, Anak started off her life in a good way, but then became extremely indecent, corrupted individual.
Oh, wow.
But yes, people ask, hold on a minute, if there's no other humans on earth, then how do they procreate? How do we have the rest of humanity? Answer is very simple. The same Lord who created them can create species for them to marry. Simple as. We reject this incest and we throw it away.
Yep.
We have mentioned a number of Israeliyat today that have to be thrown out. Amongst them, Eve being created from the rib of Adam. Amongst them, that Adam's children slept with one another, had an incestual relationship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can create creations who act as partners for this particular family. Procreation occurs from there. One line, Qabil's line, continues, and tomorrow's line we'll see with Prophet Sheeth alayhi salam. So we reject these stories about brother and sister sleeping with each other, so humanity continues. If incest is wrong today, it was wrong from the very beginning.
Ahsantum, Sayyid. Ahsantum. Sayyidina, let's just take a few questions from WhatsApp.
Yep.
This question coming in from New York City. My name is Rashid from NYC and I have a question. How come the angels questioned God's will when he decided to create Adam? Aren't they, peace be upon them, supposed to be when they ordered as stated in the Quran? I think you answered that already. Now, in terms of Qabil and Habil, the two brothers, one was devout to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other went directly against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as you mentioned, their sister, who later on became indecent. What was the story of Qabil? Like, what led one to kill the other?
Well, I think the first lesson we learn is just because you're a prophet of Allah doesn't mean your kids are all religious. Sometimes we imagine that when we hear a family has a religious surname, it means that everybody in that family is going to be religious. On the contrary, in the same way the fingers on our hands are all different in shapes and size, likewise, the family members, you may find religious and non-religious. And Nabi Adam alayhi salam, inshallah, tomorrow's show we go towards his death and who succeeds him. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never leaves the earth without appointing a guide. And it's the role of the Khalifa to announce that next guide. He's not just going to leave it to people who are going to choose people based on their own whims and desires. Qabil is the eldest son. He thinks he should be the leader. He doesn't realize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't choose you on the basis of you being the eldest son. He chooses those who are fit to look after his message. So what you have then is this second case of envy. Qabil hears that his father Adam announces that Habil will succeed him, has been chosen by Allah. Qabil cannot take this. And subhanallah, how many times in life we see that there's fights between brothers, arguments between brothers who do not talk to one another. And it continues that there are brothers until today who are willing to fight each other. In this case, not just fight. He wants to kill him. لَأَقْتُلَنَّكَ, I'm going to kill you. And the reply of Habil highlighted the piety of Habil. The reply of Habil was, لئن بسطت إلي يدك لتقتلني ما أنا بباسط يدي إليك لأقتلك إني أخاف الله رب العالمين. You put forward your hand to kill me. There's no way I'm putting forward my hand to kill you. Meaning that I don't want to start an altercation. You're actually going to kill me simply because I've been announced as the successor of Nabi Adam alayhi salam. Nabi Adam says, okay, both of you make an offering. And there are different narrations about the offerings that they make. Inshallah, on tomorrow night's show, when we talk about the death of Habil, and then why Allah gifted sheath to Nabi Adam, we'll see how these offerings, how they were accepted, and then we'll see how the family continued from there.
That was actually my next question on what the offerings were. But thank you very much, Sayyidina. Thank you for your time tonight. Inshallah, iftar won't be too long for you.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. I'd like to thank the viewers for tuning in to this live show.